rainy, somewhat dreary fall day on my hands. It's quite chilly outside. Thinking it's around 55, maybe 60 degrees, and this is what it's gonna be like all week. Quite honestly though, I love it. I'm not really sure what it is, but I love it. Last night it rained for the first time in over a month. It's been close to 6 weeks of drought here in South Central Pennsylvania. And what a glorious sound when we laid down to go to bed and hear the pitter patter of rain on the roof. I love falling asleep to rain, but it was such a welcome sound after such a long dry period. So we have some rain this week. It is now officially fall, and I'm gonna bake. I'm gonna bake a whole bunch of stuff today and maybe tomorrow. We'll see how much I get done today. I'm having a little bit of a late start. My house needed attention. I needed to clean this morning. So now we're gonna get to baking a few things. We've got some bread making, some bagel making, some muffin making, and then I would like to make some baked oatmeal for breakfast for the week. And if I have time, I'm gonna do some tortillas as well. So we're gonna start getting some dough together. There's a few recipes that have a rise time, so I'm gonna work on those first. We're gonna make some rye bread that is just hearty and crusty and says fall to me. We are also craving the soups now that it has cooled down, and that complements soup so well. So we're gonna do some rye bread. And I'm gonna make 2 batches of bagels. I'm gonna do a pumpkin spice bagel, and I'm gonna do just a plain bagel that I can top with either like everything bagel seasoning or some cheese, and have those for breakfast sandwiches this week. Matt requested breakfast sandwiches for his breakfast. So we're gonna get to work on those doughs. For the rye bread, we're gonna need 1.5 cups warm filtered water, 2 tablespoons of oil. I am using olive oil. 1 tablespoon of honey, 1 tablespoon of molasses, 2¼ teaspoons of active dry yeast. Of course, we need some dark rye flour, 1.5 cups. Totally optional, but I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of caraway seed, 2 teaspoons of salt, and lastly is some flour. This is just some all-purpose organic flour. So we're combining rye flour and all-purpose flour today. If we were to use all rye flour, it'd be a very, very dense loaf. Now, ideally, you would want to use bread flour. Not that it's necessary, but you would get the optimal result with using the bread flour. It has higher protein, higher gluten, you're gonna get a better rise, and you're gonna get a certain texture, chewier texture. I always use all-purpose organic flour, and I am perfectly pleased with the results. So that's what I'm going to use today. I don't actually have any bread flour in the house. So we're doing rye flour and all-purpose flour. Now the amounts I gave you was for 1 loaf. I am doubling it. So I'm gonna get my warm water in here. We're gonna add honey, molasses, oil, and some yeast. Allow them to mingle, allow the yeast to activate about 5 minutes until it's nice and foamy, bubbly. The bubbles have arrived. So now we will add some rye flour, caraway seeds, salt, and mix. Now for the all-purpose flour, mixing in a little bit at a time. Switching over to the dough hook. Now I'm gonna allow the KitchenAid to do the work for me, just on a low setting here. Allow this to knead for about 10 minutes. You can totally do it by hand. Okay, this dough is proving to be a bit much for my mixer to handle. It was traveling upwards, even with my not locking the head down trick. So we're just gonna continue to do this by hand here, just for a little while longer. That feels like some nice dough. It's got some nice spring to it. It feels alive. I'm gonna get this into a bowl, cover it, allow it to sit for about an hour or until it has doubled in size. I got everything cleaned up. We're gonna move on to some pumpkin bagels. Now, I'm gonna double this recipe, but I will give you the amounts for a single batch, and as always, I will have recipes either written out or linked in the description. So I have some pumpkin in here. For one batch, you need a ½ cup and then a third cup of brown sugar. You could also use coconut sugar. So to the pumpkin puree and brown sugar, I'm adding this yeast mixture, which I have allowed to activate. So it'd be 1 packet of active dry yeast, or 2 1/4 teaspoon. It was 3/4 cup of warm water, and then I did a sprinkle of brown sugar just to feed the yeast. So that's gonna go in here, and we're gonna mix all this up. Now for some dry ingredients, 3 cups all-purpose flour, 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. If you don't have pumpkin pie spice, I will put the ingredients to make your own on the screen. That is what I do. If you don't have this, maybe you have all the ingredients to make it. It's very simple, and it quite honestly saves a bit of money to do it on your own if it's something that you use pretty regularly. And lastly, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Stir the dry together, and then we'll add it into our wet mixture. We're gonna allow this to knead for about 5 minutes. Pumpkin bagel dough ready to go. Let me get this into a greased bowl, and this is also going to sit for about an hour and rise. Okay, I'm cleaning up a little bit. I have to pivot from my original plan here. I was going to make all of the bagels at once, but I'm realizing I'm not gonna have enough room in my oven, since I'm doing double batches, for everything to go in when it needs to. So I've got the rye loaf here almost ready to get put into loaf pans and then put on its second rise. I have the pumpkin bagels, the double batch, on the first rise. So now I'm gonna move to something that I can quick whip together and just get into the oven. So I have something actually like totally done. We're gonna make some baked oatmeal. I'm gonna do a fall version. I think we're gonna do some apples and raisins and walnuts, and I'm gonna do a cream cheese swirl in that as well. Okay, we've got rye dough that has risen, doubled inside. Gonna get it out of here, divide it in two, and get it into these loaf pans. To shape these loaves, I am just tucking in the edges until it fits into my loaf pan. I didn't do anything fancy. I'm gonna cover them with saran wrap. I'm gonna let them rise for about an hour until they come to the top of the pan. Okay, the rye bread has risen just above the edge of the pan here. That's where I like to put it into the oven. It'll continue to rise a little bit more in there. And I am just gonna score this right along the side here to help steam escape in the oven. Into the oven, 350 for about 1 hour. Let's make some muffins, shall we? We're gonna do some pumpkin streusel muffins for this week's afternoon school snack. My kids love to have some coffee, which is not really coffee. I just give them the Dandy Blend, the dandelion coffee. They love it. And then they always have either a biscuit, a scone, a muffin, or a cookie, whatever I'm making that week. So for these muffins, we're going to take 1 3/4 cup all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking soda, a half teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of pumpkin pie spice, a half cup of unsalted butter, melted, 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. Now, I split that in two. I did half coconut sugar, half raw organic cane sugar, 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1 cup of canned pumpkin puree, and a 3/4 cup of buttermilk at room temp, and get all these things mixed together. Baking is like therapy to me. It is just super calming, and I find my mind quiets a bit, which is very needed in this world today. I am so excited to be back in the kitchen, feeling inspired again. I just want to bake all of the things. Anybody else feeling that right now? I also want to bake all of the things because, my goodness, the prices these days are just outrageous. This truly saves so much money to do this on your own. I know it requires time, but there's a sacrifice somewhere, either your time or your money. So if I have the time, I am going to do my best to use it wisely and get some things homemade for us. And on top of saving money, I know these are obviously better options than most of what you can find at the grocery store. I try and pick one day a week to be my baking day. And honestly, if I wasn't filming, I could have gotten all this done in probably about 4 hours. And I mean, that's not all hands-on time. That's just waiting for things to rise and to bake. It took me a bit longer because, quite honestly, filming adds about 3 times the amount of time it should take. But it really is quite doable. Set aside one afternoon or one evening a week, or even a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Get your baking done for the week. The streusel topping here is 6 tablespoons of butter, cold, 1 cup brown sugar. I used coconut sugar, a cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Mix that all together, crumble it over the top. These go into a 350-degree oven for about 18 to 20 minutes. Of course, butter is required on every bread item that comes out of my oven. There's nothing like some melted butter on the top of fresh bread. This bread was so yummy, sliced beautifully. Now, I always get asked where I got this bread knife from. So I picked this up a few years back at the Homesteaders of America conference. The small business name is Riverwood Trading Co. I have their knife and I have a whole bunch of their wooden kitchen utensils, which I love and highly recommend. I'm not affiliated with them, but they do have an Instagram account and they have a website if you want to check them out. On to pumpkin bagels. I am going to divide the dough out here. I did a double batch that gave me, I believe, 18 bagels.
And I just take each little portion, I roll it into a ball, and then I poke a hole right down through the middle, and I just start to stretch a little bit until all the sides are even, and I get them onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet. In the meantime, I've got a pot of boiling water here with some baking soda in it. We're going to boil the bagels on each side for about 45 seconds. I'm going to remove them and put them back on that parchment-lined cookie sheet. I like to do a butter wash on these pumpkin bagels, and then I sprinkle them with some clumps of brown sugar.
My microphone has died, so there is a change in audio quality at this moment. So the bagels just came out of the oven. I think I made an oopsie there. When I went to boil them in the water and the baking soda mixture, I realized I think I added that same amount of baking soda to the actual dough. There wasn't a divide in the recipe under the ingredients. You know, the baking soda was just listed there with everything else. Now, no lie, I have made these 20 times, and I don't think I've ever done this before. I'm not sure where my brain was. So, that might be a little bit on the bitter side. I tried to zhuzh them up with some butter and a good sprinkling of brown sugar to try and balance out that. I think I will maybe make a flavored cream cheese to serve with them, and maybe some honey cinnamon cream cheese just to try and make them palatable. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I made that oopsie. We'll find out in the morning when we go to try them. But muffins turned out amazing, super delicious. They will be gobbled up in no time here. The rye bread was also delicious. We had that with our dinner this evening. And the baked oatmeal I have made a ton of times, so I know it's really good, and we will enjoy that for breakfast this week. But that is all for tonight. I've got a sink full of dishes and a dirty kitchen I need to sort out, and then I'd like to actually sit down and relax with my family for a little bit. So we will continue tomorrow.
The next morning, I got started right away on that second batch of bagels. I'm not going to bore you with that process since we already made some bagels. You saw how that all works. I am going to include the recipe and instructions down in the description if you are interested in trying it out.
Verdict on the pumpkin bagels. Yeah, the oopsie was made. There's definitely some excess baking soda in these. You can just kind of detect it. It's not terrible. It's honestly perfectly fine. You can just tell the flavor's just a little bit off, and the pumpkin isn't shining through as I would have hoped how it, normally is, but they're still perfectly edible. I did just dress up some cream cheese a little bit, and I threw in some honey and some pumpkin pie spice, slather that on here, and honestly delicious. So they're gonna get put to use. We're gonna eat them. There's no way I'm ditching them or remaking them. So that's that. The other bagels are on their first rise there. We're gonna move on to some tortilla making. I'm gonna do that in between homeschool today, so I'm gonna be back and forth a little bit. So I'm making some flour tortillas today. The recipe is just flour, baking powder, salt, some hot water, and some sort of fat. I have used lard, I have used butter, and I have used oil. Today I'm using oil because it's the most readily accessible, and I just want to get this here done. I've got lots to do today. So I'm gonna grab some flour. We need 3 cups. 1, 2, 3 teaspoons of salt. That's about what I have left in there. Teaspoon baking powder. Then I have 1 cup pretty hot water and a 1/3 cup of oil in here. I'm just using some organic olive oil. Gonna have this running on low speed, and I'm just going to pour this in here. Gonna give this a mix for like 30 seconds, and I'm gonna scrape down the sides, and then I'm gonna turn it back on low speed, allow the dough hook to knead this for like 5 minutes. You want the dough to be nice and elastic and smooth. So here's our tortilla dough ball. It's got some nice spring to it, fairly smooth on the outside. Now I'm gonna let this rest in a covered bowl. I'm gonna cover it with saran wrap so it doesn't develop any like crust on it. I'm gonna let it rest for like 30 minutes. I'm gonna go do some schoolwork. Probably in like 15 minutes, I'm gonna come check the bagels and see if they're ready to be shaped.
I got the bagels all shaped up. We're going to boil them again, just like before, 45 seconds per side. Now, if you want, you can also use honey instead of baking soda or like a malt barley, which I have never been successful in finding. So I either go back and forth between honey and baking soda. I topped some of these off with an everything bagel seasoning blend, and the rest I left plain. Back to the tortillas. I like to roll the dough out into a nice long log, and then I just cut little discs. You can make them as small or as big as you want. I will flatten them out, and then I let those rest for like another 10 to 15 minutes as well. The purpose of letting this dough rest so much is allowing the gluten to kind of relax and strengthen. That way, when you're rolling it out, it isn't springing back on itself. Makes it so much easier. Now, when rolling out tortillas, you want to get them as paper thin as possible. You can see here it's almost translucent in spots. You can see the darkness of the table underneath the dough. And that's how you want them. And then you just take it over to a nice hot skillet. It only takes about 30 seconds, maybe that per side. As soon as you start to see those bubbles develop, you want to flip it. And then my little secret to keep them nice and soft is putting them between wet paper towels and a dishcloth. You just keep piling them up in there, let the steam develop, and you'll have some really nice, soft, pliable tortillas. I'm going to show you here just how pliable they are. I'm going to take one and I'm going to just ball it up in my hands and give it a good squeeze, and it'll just spring right back to life. No cracking, no dryness here. These are some really soft, yummy tortillas. So most everything I made today will get eaten in the next week or two. I just like to store things in my fridge for that time period, but you can totally make some of these things in bulk and store them in the freezer. I like to put things in Ziploc bags. They stay pretty fresh in those, and usually, we eat things pretty fast. They don't stay in the freezer very long, but I would say 3 to 4 months for bread items. Otherwise, they'd be fine longer than that, but they're going to start taking on the flavors of what else is in your freezer. Okay, friend, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed today's cozy fall rainy day baking. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I love hearing from you. You have a blessed week, and I will see you next time. Take care.